Welcome back to Plague Scythe Studios, everyone. Today I want to be showing you how to achieve not one, but two distinct flavors of Metallica's classic sound with VST plugins that are free. So as a lot of you probably know, when we're talking about Metallica's good albums, which is Black Album and Back, and some people would even debate whether Black Album was a real Metallica album or not, but I digress. We're really talking about two distinct sounds. So Kill 'Em All and Ride the Lightning use Marshall amps, and Puppets and Injustice for All use the Mesa Boogie Mark III that was slaved into Marshall amps. So we're going to be doing a couple different takes with each amplifier, although the rest of the signal chain will be pretty much the same. And of course, you can tweak to your own desire if you want to, attain a little bit more accuracy, but this will get you 90% of the way there. In terms of hardware, we're sticking with this Les Paul with passive standard pickups. If you want to be really on point, the Master of Puppets and Injustice for All stuff did use EMGs, but when we're using, preamps in the USB interface going into VSTs, I don't really think it's going to make a whole hell of a lot of difference. So up to you. Add some compression and maybe a little volume boost before going into the rest of the gear, but to me it sounds pretty much identical. So like I said, this will get you a majority of the way there without even having to EQ or tweak anything. So yeah, let me show you what I did, and hopefully you can take it from there and get even closer. So if you watch the past couple of VST videos, you're going to fly through this one, because this is without a doubt the most simple signal chain yet. Obviously with Meshuggah and Devin Townsend, there's a couple other little extras on top of it they use for their tone, but this is pretty much down to the metal tone. It really doesn't get much simpler than this. It is a long signal chain here because I have a couple little things to add, not in terms of actually tone sculpting, but to mess with the going from mono to stereo and that sort of thing. But it really, all it is overdrive, pedal, amp, cab. It just looks more complicated than that. So first of all, I have a little bit of a noise gate. That's, if you want it, you can have it. If not, it's just to, eliminate the input noise. It just depends on what interface you're using. So I have really noisy humbuckers on that Les Paul. So do whatever you want there. I wouldn't turn it up too much. My release is a bit higher than usual because I didn't want that unnatural start-stop effect that a lot of people use with gates nowadays. Try to keep this organic. We are talking about thrash metal. Mono to stereo, that's just to make the mono input go to stereo. It doesn't really matter. I just wanted to make these tracks stereo to make it sound better for the recording. So you don't need that. You don't need any of these mono to stereos if you're just doing this, double tracking or whatnot. So do ignore that. The first important part of the signal chain is the TSE-808, which is of course a tube screamer. And this is one that I cycle back and forth between this one and another model. But this one is kind of the more classic sounding tube screamer, so I went with it. In the current configuration, I actually don't have the tone turned up that much, and that has to do with the amp. But if I switch the amp, I would actually turn this all the way up, and I'll show you why in a second. So always have this tube screamer on, and that's just kind of the classic metal formulation. So for Ride the Lightning and Kill 'Em All, they use plexi amps for their rhythm sound. Obviously none of this is, Kirk's lead sound. I don't have a a wah VST for you guys anyway to be able to simulate that part of it. But so this is basically a Marshall Plexi style JCM 800 sounding amp. It's called the AFD 100 Lead by Vadim Tarnoff, and he makes a couple other really good amp sims, and some of the other ones are not even close to their original counterparts. He has a Randall Satan, supposedly, model that doesn't sound anything like a Satan to me, but he does have a couple of them that are absolutely incredible. And this one is one of them. It's a bit trebly, it's a bit noisy, but I'm fairly certain this is based off of, yeah, so you can see it here. This is based off of Slash's signature model, but it does work really well as a, just a standalone Marshall. I like this model a hell of a lot more than the hybrid that comes with Poulin or the Pooh or whoever makes that one. So you're more than welcome to, try it out on your own if you'd like, but this one is without a doubt my favorite Marshall sim. So we got the gain cranked up to about 7. All the other things are left alone before that. Presence, yeah, it doesn't really do a whole lot on this amp from what I can tell. It does get a little fizzy. Power amp drive, I do have it turned up just a little bit. I don't go all the way. I love good old power amp distortion, but you'll see why in a moment. Bass is about 7 o'clock as well. Mids are almost as low as they can get. This is a very mid-heavy amp, and it is Metallica, so we do need to dial back the mids quite a bit. And treble up at 7, so that gives you a pretty good balanced crunch while staying, it does stay pretty heavy in the midsection. Our cabinet impulse response choice definitely helps with that. You can actually turn on what I believe is power amp simulation. I have it turned off. That would be EL34 tubes, and that is because I've introduced a new toy in this particular signal chain. So this is Ignite Amps TPA-1. And I've used this quite a few times, but never in these VST videos, and mainly because when I use them in the videos, it didn't sound like it did anything. For Meshuggah's sound, we were using all digital VSTs to copy an already digital sound from the Line 6 Veta 2, so, tube power amp simulation wasn't going to do a whole lot for us. And Devin Townsend, kind of a similar thing. He, does like tube amps and whatnot, but still it was so oversaturated with delay and reverb, you really couldn't tell a difference to me. With this, though, being straight up just amp cab setup, I think I can tell a difference. And there's a particular little interesting thing about the Legion back here, which I haven't talked about yet. So that is why I have the EL34s here instead of there, and you can actually control some sagging and resonance and a couple other little power amp controls, individual depth and presence, which I generally keep flat and just work with it off of the amplifier because I don't really know what they did, and I think it's easier with VSTs just to kind of leave that alone and leave that to EQing on the amp in post EQ. So we'll leave that one alone for now, and we'll talk about the speakers. So I'm using different impulse responses than I've ever used to achieve this, and I'm glad I found them. These are actually red wire, as far as I know. So these are Marshall 1960A cabinets loaded with G12s, and I'm mixing between a U67, which is a Neumann microphone, and a Shure SM57. Of course, that's like a classic combination, but they're also placed in, I would say both of them are fairly ideal locations. So the big bulky condenser mic's about a couple inches outside of the cap, and the SM57 is only about a ½ inch. So when you mix those two together, you get some nice phase cancellation, gets rid of some of the fizziness, brings out some of the highs on the U67. It sounds really good. I'm using that because I know James Hetfield's favorite speakers are G12s. He was really particular about that in recording, and he's also very particular about the room acoustics, mic placement, all of that sort of thing that really achieve the Metallica tone. And I think these get really close. I've tried some of the Mesa stuff, I've tried other G12s, and these are my favorite. So these will definitely be in the impulse response folder. You might have to dig for them a little bit, just search through it under red wire. Let's see if I can show you exactly where they are. So yeah, impulses, Marshall 1960A red wire, choose whatever bit rate and frequency you want, and they'll be listed by microphone, which is really, really helpful. These are among the best I've used, aside from, well, I would say the best in terms of organization and options, but some of the best sounding, no doubt. So I've just got a couple of those. I panned them to be stereo. If I were you, I would make them separate tracks or separate volume in a mono. That way you can, just mix and match as you see fit. So that's cabinets, and then I go back to mono stereo, just make it a little bit chunky sounding for you guys for when you listen to the single guitar recording. It's a lot easier than double tracking. The only other little thing I do is, if I can get all this crap out of the way, is a nice little healthy scoop at about 800 hertz, and that would be mainly to bring down the mids on the Mesa stuff, but it does actually match a lot of the Marshall sounds that they did on Kill 'Em All and Ride the Lightning. So that's about a -6 decibels. I got a pretty healthy Q factor going on. And if you're wondering why maybe it sounded a little bit fizzly, is because I have no low pass on this. Of course, if you were doing this in, a normal mix, you would have, I would cut off about 12,000 or less, depending on the sound you're going for. So I just did that to make it sound a little bit more full while it's on its own. But that's about it. Now, here comes the fun part. So like I said, for Ride the Lightning and Kill 'Em All, they used Plexy's JCM 800 style amps. But after the tour on Ride the Lightning and recording in Master of Puppets and Injustice for All, they switched to the Mesa Boogie Mark II. I said Mark III earlier, it was slip. I meant to say Mark II. It was Mark II C++, matter of fact. So that was one of my favorite Mesa Boogie amps ever. I'd kill to have an original one. And for that, I turn up the tone a little bit, and on this Tube Screamer that is, and we go back to our favorite Poland Legion, and there actually is a Mesa Mark II, and let me see if I can find it. I'll override this Mars since we're done with it, but I don't like it near. Okay, so it's a Mark III. I don't like this at all, though. It's doesn't have any of the post EQ, so you'd have to do that on your own. They're built into this, and that's not how Mesa Mark amps work, so I don't really like that amp quite a bit. This was also built by Mr. Taranoff. It's not a bad sounding amp, it just doesn't sound like Boogie to me, so I'm just going to stick with what I know best on this Poland Legion. Switch to the red channel. Green is hotter most of the time, so we're going to go to red and lead just to get a bit more of a classic sound. Do crank the drive. Low, mid is only dialed back a little bit. High is about where low is. And I really don't touch a whole lot of the controls on here. It sounded pretty good out of the box once I did apply this scoop. So that will do you for about anything in the Master of Puppets and Injustice for All sound. It can also get fairly close on the Black Album sound, though that's not really what I was going for. In this, you will need even more razor sharp high end and scoop mids for that. But between those two amps, that should cover you for basically all of your Metallica needs. And you can always play with other impulse responses, but I think these are really good. One last little bonus trick here. In the impulses, you'll actually find a folder called Actual Band and Song IRs, and there's a Metallica folder with all kinds of songs. I don't know how they extract this. I assume someone is just isolating a guitar track. They record an amp, just a dry amp signal, whatever it may be, and then they kind of subtract the sound using the tone match software plugin, and then they get whatever's left. So this may not sound great depending on what you use, but I've gotten, with a little bit of post EQ and playing around with the whatever amp sim I'm using behind it to sound really close to the album. So if you're looking for a more spot-on representation, feel free to check that out, but I think these Marshalls will get you quite a long ways. By the time you get into the mix and drums and stuff, it's not going to matter a whole hell of a lot. This will do you really well for, an easy cover or something like that, though. So, yeah, this was one of the easier ones. Hopefully, we'll do a couple more easier ones like this. But, before we went too much further with this series, I thought, well, we got to cover, the classic thrash metal sound with Metallica. So, yeah, do leave your suggestions and comments below. Let me know how you liked it. Hopefully, this was helpful. And let me know other artists you'd like to see in the future. I've got a whole laundry list full of them. I've just not been able to get to this series because of AX8 stuff and all the new toys I'm trying to review along the way. But I'll be sure to keep this among the top of my list for priority. So thanks for watching, and we will see you next time. Bye.